In this video, we will be looking into a REST client which is known as Retrofit. Retrofit is an open source type safe HTTP client for Android and Java. So how it is different from REST template and other REST client which we use normally is that it turns your HTTP API into a Java interface. So as we can see here, that we have an interface which is known as which is named as GitHub service, and it has one method exposed which is for listing the repos. But if we see closely, that this is similar to a kind of methods which we normally declare at the controller level, right? We expose an endpoint with a get mapping, and we provide the path if we have any path in our API path which we want to have a dynamic value. So similar to that, it basically retrofit gives us a way to define that what kind of API we want to access, what is the method of that API, what are the bodies that API expect, and what is the body or response that API exposes or returns. So those things we can define into a Java interface, and retrofit will do all the job of connecting to that third party API using these information which you provide in this interface. So for example, here in this GitHub service, they have mentioned that this is the path which retrofit needs to connect to using a get. Basically, it's a get API, and this is the base URL which is mentioned here. So if we open this, let's say github.com, and let me give my username. It has returned some response, and these responses are basically a list of objects, and all the objects are a kind of repo, right? So this is one repo, then this is another repo, right? So these are the JSON objects or JSON response. Now the retrofits need these informations to convert these responses to the plain old Java object which we need in our application. So let's see how it does that. So the first thing is to basically create an interface and provide all the methods or define all the APIs which we want to connect to. And then what retrofit does is retrofit generates an implementation of all of these methods, right? Basically, it will generate the implementation of this service, and it will generate the implementation of these methods. We are just defining the method. We are not providing the implementation. The implementation will be provided by the retrofit class itself. So what we need to do is we need to provide enough information about those APIs, about the third party APIs, that what that API is. It is a get API or a post API or a delete API. What is the path of those APIs? Then what that API expects in the body, like a request body or some variable or some query parameter, some path parameter, and then what that API returns. So all this information we have to provide into an interface through a method into an interface, and that implementation of that interface will be provided by the retrofit class. So retrofit class will generate the implementation, and then we can use the retrofit instance to make a call to that API. How do we do that? So we need to first get an object of retrofit. So that we can do by calling the builder method on the retrofit class itself. So we'll create a retrofit object by passing the base URL. So this is the URL. This is the URL which will differ each API wise, right? If you want to create something or delete something, so this is the endpoint which will be different, but this will be the base endpoint or base URL. So that we'll have to provide in the retrofit builder, and along with that we also need to provide some kind of converter, because by default it will only convert from okay HTTP request body to a response body to the response body. But since here the third party API will be returning a JSON response, and we want to consume that JSON response and uh, convert that into a plain old Java object or the Java object basically. So for that purpose we need to have a converter. And what kind of converter is basically provided by retrofit? So those converters are as you can see here. So these are the converters which are supported by the retrofit client. So JSON is one which will be basically as you can see, it will be used to convert from the JSON to the Java object, and from Java object to JSON. So it will do all the jobs of deserialization and serialization. So we'll be using the JSON converter in our example today. So as you can see here, Retrofit can only deserialize HTTP bodies into OK HTTP's response body type, and it can only accept its request body type for @body. So as you can see here, so if you want to create a retrofit object, we have to provide the base URL, and then we have to also provide our converter. They have provided a JSON converter. Once we are done creating the retrofit instance, then what we can do, then we have to provide an implementation of that interface, right? So to let retrofit create the implementation of that interface which we have created, we need to call this line, that GitHub service. In our case, we have to provide retrofit.create our interface. We have to mention our interface class here. So this using this line, retrofit will create the implementation of that particular interface. And each call from the created service or created interface or created implementation can make a synchronous or asynchronous HTTP request to the remote web server. So we'll see how we can actually call that service using the retrofit client. To start with, we need to have two dependencies. Let me just follow. So here is one dependency, which is com.squareapp.retrofit2. So if you click on this, we can grab the latest dependency. Okay, let me first create a Springboard application, start.spring.io. Now we'll be using a Maven project, so I'll just add one dependency, which is the web dependencies. That's it. Then there's insights, and this will be retrofit demo, or what we can do, retrofit client. Yeah. Okay, and we'll be using Java 8 generate. The first step is to add the dependencies. We'll go here. We'll add our first dependency, which is retrofit 2.9.0, and we would also need to have one converter. Let me search for JSON, or I can search for so this one, converter JSON. Okay, let me refresh the dependencies. And just to see if the dependencies are downloaded, I'll just try to import something. Yeah, retrofit 2 is available. Okay, so now for our demo purpose today, what I will be using is, I'll be using this particular JSON placeholder API, which is available online. It provides various APIs like getting a resource, a get API, listing all the resources, get posts, then creating a resource or create API, or updating put API, and delete. We'll be making these APIs as a third-party APIs to connect to. So let me try to call this. So if I call this, so it will return me on the post which is having an ID as 1, and if I remove the 1, then it will be returning me all the posts. So the first step, what I'll be doing is, I'll be creating the packages. Let me just quickly create controller. Then we'll be having service. We'll also have one constants. Then we'll also have IPL. IPL will be inside service. Let me make it util, and inside service will be having IMP. Okay, let me first create a controller basically. Let's say we'll be having a post controller, right? Quickly I'll add rest controller, sorry, request mapping. Let me just give it as v1 slash retrofit. Okay, and in this controller what we'll be having is we'll be having various API which we will be exposing. Public list of post, for example, fetch post. Okay, this will be create class post under model. Fine. We'll be creating that. So okay, this will be get mapping, let's say post. The time being, let me make it as return. Okay, now the next thing will be post. So what are the fields here? User ID, title, and body. Okay, before that, let me also add Lombok. Okay, so in post, what we'll be having is we'll be having a user ID, then we'll be having normal ID, we'll be having title, be having body. I think these are the four fields which is present in the response. Uh, user ID, title, and body. Okay, fine. And we will be annotating these with add data, add all our constructor. Okay, and to we don't need setters. Okay, fine. So we have a post controller which will be this will be exposed by our application, and this will call that online API, free API service to get all the posts. We have our model ready. Now we'll go to service and we'll create our service. So the first thing which we want to create is let me create an interface. Post service. So this will be in the service. Okay. Add service. Public list of posts. Fetch posts. That's it. Okay. So this is one service. We'll also provide the implementation for this one. So we'll create IMPL and we'll create our post service IMPL. This will be implementing. Okay, fine. Now the most important thing is to create our interface, Java interface, to let retrofit know that what all API we want to invoke. So we'll create an in Java interface in here. So let me create it inside the service only. This will be interface and the name will be, let's say, post API. Okay, so this is the interface. This is for the retrofit client. The first method will be fetch posts. Sorry, fetch posts, right? And what this will return? This will return a call list of posts. Okay, so this call is from retrofit 2, right? And what kind of method that is? That is a get method. And what will be the URL? Slash posts. So the URL will be slash post, and these will be our base URL. So what we'll do, we will be creating our base URL inside this constant. Uh, Retrofit constant. Fine. So our base URL would be till slash. Okay. Now we'll be using this base URL whenever we want to call the retrofit client. Now this is the interface or the retrofit method which we have provided. So we are saying that we want to invoke slash post API, which is a get API, and we have provided the definition of the methods, and now retrofit will be providing the implementation for this at the runtime. Now one last thing which is left is to create the retrofit instance. So let me create a util class which will give me the retrofit instance. Okay. Retrofit instance. Okay, let's okay, sorry. Okay, private retrofit equals to null. Now we will return if retrofit equals to null. Then what we'll do is we'll create retrofit equals to new retrofit builder dot base URL, and this will be retrofit constant dot stop it. Okay, I think I have not. Okay, so this will be base URL. Then we'll be adding a converter factory, and that will be JSON converter factory dot create and dot build. So we have built our retrofit instance in case it is null, and then we'll just return this retrofit instance. Okay, so the util class job is to just return the retrofit instance whenever we need it. We have created our post API interface with this method. Now we want our retrofit client to provide the implementation for this. So for that purpose, what we need to do is we need to tell retrofit that you need to provide the implementation for this post API interface. So for that, we'll be needing post API. Okay, and what I'm doing is I am doing that in the constructor itself. So public post service IMPL. Okay, and retrofit equals to retrofit util dot get retrofit instance. Okay, and now post API equals to retrofit dot create post API dot class. Okay, Now we have the retrofit instance now, and also we have the post API implementation for the post API. So now what we can do is we can directly call post API dot fetch posts, and this will return call list post. So we'll be putting that in the call list of post. Let me make it as post call. Okay, or we can say that fetch post call. FTCH fetch post call. Okay. Now, till here, it will not be fetching anything, right? Until unless we perform the synchronous or asynchronous operation on this retrofit call object. So as we can see here, they have mentioned, right, that each call from the created GitHub service, which means this is the call which was created from this service, right, post API service. So from this call, we can make either a synchronous call or an asynchronous call. So to do that, what we can do is we can use this call object fetch post call, and as you can see here, we have a method called execute and we have a method called enqueue. So this enqueue method is basically used when we want to communicate with the third party web server in an asynchronous way. And if you want to communicate with a synchronous way, that we want to get the response immediately as soon as we do then execute, then we will be using this execute method. So here we'll be using an execute method to have a synchronous call. So execute, and you can see here we have a red flag which says unhandled exception java.io exception. So what can happen is when we are calling this execute method on this call object, so in the worst situation or the network failure or in any uneventful situation when this retrofit client is not able to fetch any response from the third party web server, then in that case it will throw an IO exception. So we need to handle that while writing our code. So let me surround this with try and catch, and whenever we call this execute method on the call object, it will be returning a response, and response will be a list of posts. So we'll be getting, so let me just create a variable list of post uh, post response post new. Okay, and list of post. Okay, so this is the response which we'll be getting. But now what we need to do is we need to check whether this response is successful, and response dot body is not equals to null. Then what we'll be doing is we'll be putting that response in the, we'll be getting the body and we'll be putting it inside this post response, and at last we'll be returning it, return post response. Okay, so now we refactor this name post. So okay, fine. So I think everything is fine. Post controller at the rest, address controller at request mapping. Okay, here we need to wire up the service. So we need post service, post service, add service, oh sorry, auto wire, and return post service dot fetch post. So this will return the list of posts. Okay, so our controller is done. Then it will move to our service. It will call this API and will return the post response. We'll also have to mark this at component. And in the post API, we have this. We'll be marking it as add service. Oh, sorry, not this one. This one. Add service, it is marked, right? Okay. Server.port equals to 8082. Let me start the application. Okay, so application has started on 8082 with no error. Let me see what is the /v1/retrofit/post. We'll go here, localhost 8082/v1/retrofit/posts. Okay, so as you can see, whenever we are invoking our local API, which is v1 retrofit/post, it is giving me all the post which is being returned by this API. So it seems our implementation of retrofit client is working fine. Okay, so let me also try to add. Okay, so now let us add another API, which will be to fetch a single post. So what we'll write is call, return call of post, fetch post by ID. Okay, now we need to provide the ID in terms of getting the relevant post. So the retrofit HTTP will be add get, and it will be /posts, then /this. It is similar to the get mapping or the request path which we provide for our Spring REST APIs. That we, whenever we are providing anything in these other curly braces, we need to provide the value inside this. We need to provide the related dynamic value to this request parameters. So we'll be using at path, which is coming from retrofit2.http, and the variable is ID. We want to map it to integer, and we will be giving it as name and ID. Okay, so what this will do is this will assume that whatever we are passing in the /ID, it is of type integer. Okay, and it will return a call of post. Now let me add a method to this service. This will be only post fetch post by ID, and ID. Okay, so here I have to implement another method. Okay, and what we are doing here is, first let me make a post equals to null. Okay, and then what we'll be getting is call of post post call equals to, let's say, post API dot fetch post by ID, and the ID will be passed by the controller. Now this post call, which we'll be wrapping inside the try and catch block. This will be IO, and in here what we'll do is post call dot execute, and this will return response of post. So it's quite simple. Response equals to this, and now we'll check if if this response dot is successful and response dot body is not equals to null, then we'll be assigning this response to the post, and we'll be returning this post. Restart the server. Oh, sorry, I did not add any controller till now. So I'll be adding one more controller, which will be returning a post, and this will be fetch post. So this will be get mapping slash post slash id, and in here what we can do is we can do path variable id int id and return post service dot fetch post by id. Restart the service. I'll go to the browser, and this was the posts API which was giving us all the list of posts which is available. And if you pass anything, let's say 3, it will give me the relevant post, right? If I say 5, the relevant post. Okay, and if we do, let's say 10, it will give me the 10th post. So this is how we can implement retrofit client in our Springboard application, and it is quite simple. We don't have to do much about it. We just have to create one interface which will be keeping a hold of all the REST endpoints in terms of a Java interface method which we want our retrofit client to have implementation for, and at the runtime it will go and connect to that API to fetch the response, right? So this is what we need. So like the get API, we can also have a post API, we can also have a delete API. So quickly I'll just create one for the post API. So let me do public post create post at request body post post, and here we can call return post service dot create post, and we'll pass in the post. This will be at post mapping and slash post will be creating create method post. Right. Okay, so this is created this method. In the IMPL we need to have similar kind of thing. Okay, so I'll just copy paste this one. Okay, so let's say new post. Okay, so the post will be created. So this is the post object which is passed by the user. Create post will be creating this post. First I'll create this post in the method. Okay, so create post, and this will be at post retrofit dot to, and this will be slash posts, but here we need to provide at body. So at request body is something which we provide while creating our Springboard Spring REST API. But in order to let retrofit know, we need to annotate with at body. Okay, so this will let retrofit know that we are passing in the post object, and this is the create post API. So in the post service IMPL, we are doing create post, it will return a post call post, and then we are doing execute, and everything is fine. So let me also print something here. So I'll just print response dot body. Okay, just to see that if we are creating a post, the response is also the same post which we are trying to create. We'll do restart. Okay, so let me think it is started. Let me create a post API. So this is our post, for example, and the API will be http localhost 8082 v1 retrofit and post. Okay, so if you do send, we are getting the same post object back. It means that we are, see here also, this is being written. So it has created this post basically. So since actually in actually this has not created any post, because that service does not allow to create a post or to delete a post, but in a in a sense that retrofit is trying to connect to that API and creating a post. So this is how the create post API works. So similarly, we can also have another thing which is, let's say, called post delete post, right? And we can have add delete mapping. Then what we can have is we can have slash posts slash, we can also give ID, that which ID we want to delete, and we can pass add path ID ID. Okay, and this will delete the post. So this will not in actual happen right now because of that service limitation, but this is how we do, and rest everything will be same. In here we'll have this thing similarly. In here also, for this delete method also we'll have this same thing. We'll have to do post API dot delete post, and this will return a post call or a call object, and that call object we will be calling execute method. So this execute method will be knowing that okay, we are calling delete API, so we have to operate on, we have to basically call the delete API on this path. So this is how the retrofit will provide the implementation or for that particular method.